Yes, we are live now, and good morning to everybody listening to us. This is yes, Tim. Okay, this is the podcast, the Wednesday morning podcast of Japan Expert Insights, where we talk about topics related to Japan and Japan's business environment. This morning we have with us once again Marco Machi, who is based in the United States and who is currently working for Hitachi. He has a very long career in the field of energy industry. And so we're going to talk about well, Japan's solar, green, and smart energy. So, how the status quo is at the moment and what we can expect in the future. But before that, of course, I would like to say a big thank you to our first sponsor. You already know who this is. It is Kanchu, or as they're known online, Kanchu.com. There you can connect with James Howell by email. He is available at james@kanchu.com. Kanchu is based in Yokohama. They do buying and selling real estate in the city of Yokohama. They do real estate investment and property management. So please do not hesitate. Reach out and talk with James. You can talk with him in English. You can talk with his colleagues in Japanese. So the language barrier should not be an issue there. Well, and once again, a big thank you to Kanchu. And now we're back to the podcast, of course. And I want to say, Marco, once again, thank you for agreeing to be with us, our guest speaker today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Tim, for having me. I was very excited. I think it's been probably 2 months since I came on for my first
Oh,
podcast talking about my own journey, 5 years in Tokyo in Japan. It
Yeah.
was a little more relaxed setting in terms of me sharing all the silly experiences, getting acquainted with Japan. So I'm excited to be back, and I appreciate you giving me the time, and look forward to the conversation.
Yes, very much so. Could you please tell a little bit about you? So, a little bit maybe
Sure.
about your career and the energy industry.
Sure. Yes. So I'm originally a very good example of a hybrid because I myself am from Italy. I was born and raised in Rome, and then right after my master degree, I started traveling for a conglomerate, for a Swiss Swedish energy conglomerate, and then I ended up in the United States. I moved to the U.S. in '96 after some training rotations across Europe, and I would say it's been a steady exposure and growth into the energy industrial space, both in the oil and gas, utility energy, and most recently into the more emerging segment, and that's what's really make it exciting for me to really have this conversation in terms of what innovation is bringing to the energy ecosystem in here in North America, and also obviously in Asia, and particularly in Japan, where we're going to be focusing a little bit on this morning. And just out of clarity, I think that there's very little variance of opinions in terms of how Japan energy industry is evolving. It's a fact. It's in front of everybody. I'm happy to share my own experiences, observations, and those are really totally my own views. But I welcome. I hope that we can kind of stimulate conversations out of this, and facilitate more and more conversations in the future. So I'm sharing what I've observed in my time in Japan and what I continue to observe, and the excitement that I see in the trends.
just
Yeah.
so
Yes,
I
go
don't,
ahead, Tim.
no. Well, just I guess a comment. Um, I'm pretty ignorant about this in this space, this sector. So I'm really interested. You could. I'm a blank sheet of paper, and I guess some of what I might ask you to keep in mind is as you go through it and share your stories. Um, I don't even know the American sector, so any comparisons you can make along the way to help give me a contrast, because what I think is really interesting about Japan is if you take something that has to be done worldwide, whatever it is, ecology, Japan is always going to have their own flavor. There's going to be a little different twist there that you didn't see
Yes.
coming. And but what I'm saying is, if I learn Japan first, I don't know really necessarily how it differs from other countries. So if you can jump in here and there and just to help me
I,
orient.
I will be happy to do it, Tim.
Okay.
And just to kind of give you a preview is you may be surprised on how much a journey of different countries in the energy cycle and the energy business has been really similar. Japan is unique in my opinion because has a very unique mix of challenges and opportunities.
Right.
But by and large, everything that I'm sharing with you all this morning, resonates a lot with what's going on in North America and in Europe. I think that it's really fair to say that we're living in a very unique time, and I'm unprecedented, time of transformation, one that we and our generations prior have not seen in terms of a unique blend of trends, cycles coming together. So a lot of what you'll hear me observing this morning relates also to what's going on here in North America.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
No, thank you very much for that. And I'm really curious to hear what your observations are and
Yeah.
what you can tell us, because there is this general stereotype about Japan that nothing ever changes here,
Right,
right?
right, right. Very
And
much so. Very much so.
yes, and while on the surface it might look this way, uh, just below the surface there are so many things going on and there is so much change that at the end of the day, when people really notice the change, it will be huge and everybody will wonder, how did it happen?
And
Right.
sneakily faster than you thought. Because
Right.
everything is super slow for anything in Japan.
Mhm.
And then at the very end, it's like a gun was shot,
True,
like
true,
things happen like that. It builds slowly, and then boom, it gets
true,
done, right? And
true.
I was just going to say, culturally and historically, Japan is a resource starved country,
Mhm.
which means by necessity, they had to be extremely resourceful in their thinking, maximizing yield of, within the limited resources that you have.
Right.
And so this is just another challenge along the way related to that theme of how do we deal with this resource, this lack of resources, in this case, energy. So
Yeah.
again, I think that's why it's so interesting, like how they're evolving. So
Yes,
that's all
and
I
Tim,
wanted to
yes,
mention.
and
Yeah.
Tim, I'm listening to you before I ask Marco my question. And I'm listening to you say, that the country is starved of natural resources. And to a certain extent, it's true. But think about the huge ocean which is out there. Think about, the elements. We've got wind most of the time here in
Mhm.
Japan, blowing, from
Yeah.
all directions, right? And the tidal waves are here. So I believe that while yes, the country is starved probably of fossil fuels, but at the same time, it has a lot of other resources, doesn't it?
Oh,
And
no
but
doubt.
we just didn't
No
have
doubt.
we didn't have the technology, I believe, to tap into those resources and use them. But I'm going to stop here because. Well, I'm not a specialist there. I'm just, letting my brain go in circles. And Marco, you mentioned in our prep talk that Japan's energy mix is so very unique, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about this. Why is it unique? What makes it so?
Abs- Absolutely. Yeah. And by the way, what you just mentioned with Tim, it's a perfect segue into the uniqueness of Japan. I think that first and foremost, we need to be mindful of where Japan fits and ranks globally. Japan is the fifth largest energy consumer in the world.
Mhm.
If you can wrap your head around a number, we're talking about a consumption of almost 1,000 terawatt hour of power of electricity in a country of 140 million now.
125
125.
Okay,
million.
125 million.
Yes.
So it's remarkable, and I think the uniqueness, if you will, is the fact that there are so many variables and components of both technology trends, historical, that are really coming together, especially at
Mhm.
this time. If I think about the key ones, it's really a country that is bringing together the challenges of providing power, energy to all the connected customers, residential
Right.
connected customers, industrial, and the opportunity. So from that unique blend is really that's why I consider Japan a very unique country in terms of what those challenges and opportunities can unlock. Um, the first that we all recognize is that the high dependency on imports. If you look at fossil fuel, coal, Japan has been depending largely of imports of oil, coal, natural gas, and this really has brought the country to really shift on a vulnerability, but at the same time motivated companies and the government to really focus on energy security, but not on traditional sources like coal, oil, and gas, but bringing diversification in energy resources. So I would say the main component of this uniqueness is the status quo. Japan has remained for many years a country that relied on imports of oil, coal, and natural gas.
Mhm.
The second one is the geothermal power, because of the geography, as you mentioned. The tidal is surrounded by the ocean, but mostly is because it has a very active tectonic plate underneath, and there's a lot of volcanoes. There's a lot of activities from a tectonic point of view. So the geothermal power, I want to say makes Japan a global leader. And I want to say that also gives the government an avenue to really drive growth, economic growth, and expand the sector. The
Could I
third.
ask a question about the geothermal?
Mhm.
Um, how far, how advanced is it in Japan at this point? I was in Hawaii and they were doing it there, but there was a lot of resistance from the locals who believe Pele, that's all Pele, and it can't be
Mhm.
disrespectful to the goddess, right? So there was a lot of that. So I was just wondering, like, how advanced are the Japanese? Do they have a long way to go? Can they really
I
develop?
think that's a great question. I would say if you look at the 10 largest utilities, public utilities in the island, they're all investing geothermal in different ways. You also have independent power providers in Japan that are really looking at maximizing, optimizing output, power generation.
Yeah.
I say this. One of the keys of maximizing utilization capacity of geothermal, Tim, is the ability to really store energy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And,
Right.
and,
Right.
and, and
Right.
and that has
Right.
been a pivotal point in really making and breaking that trend of making geothermal power sustainable and also reliable. The ability to really store energy and then deploy it, discharge it for utilization.
Right.
um, that's kind of my observation. And as much as geothermal power is a trend, I think that renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, remain probably the largest driver of self dependence in terms of energy for Japan. Uh,
Is there a tendency toward cent keeping these systems centralized and then distributing them everywhere, or localizing separate?
yes, yes, there is, and out of respect for the scope of this conversation, I want to be as succinct as spotty on the question, because you asked a very important question. When it comes to renewable power, which is a major component of this uniqueness of Japan, centralization is a major component. You may not have heard, and some of the people that are listening this today may have heard about virtual power plants. which is a way to say energy is being generated and distributed today around a model that is completely different from the bespoke centralization that we had through the years.
Okay.
Uh, Long gone are the times where TEPCO or Chubu Power would just have a centralized power plant and then unidirectionally feed power to the communities and the industrial sites. Those times are long gone.
Right.
So you have more actors that are independently providing power, and you have uh, solar power being generated, stored, and also centralized. We hear more and more about microgrids, which is really another buzzword in the emerging segment today. It's where industrial hubs, residential communities are using renewable power, in this case, mostly solar, to store and redistribute energy as it's needed. So yes, your answer is spot on. Is a great. Your question is spot on. It's a great question, and yes, there is a clear trend of centralization of energy that is taking place not only in Japan, but I would say across the world as we see the energy transformation taking place and accelerating.
Yes, just to recap a little bit, you mean, well, you mentioned that in order to use geothermal energy, well, let's say smoothly, we need to find a way to store big amounts of energy, right? So that and then
That-
in this sense of the word, I believe this is the case also with other renewables like solar and wind, probably tidal wave energy, which also ties this sector, or maybe this the production of energy, to the production of batteries and the development of renewable
Absolutely.
energy production is tied very closely to the technology of batteries, right? Because I
Yes.
remember that the
Precious metals.
precious metals and
Yeah.
of course it's also, I mean, not only the precious metals, but at the end of the day we also have to think how we dispose of the batteries after their useful life, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
a whole cycle here, but I'm not sure that this is really the direction we want to go into today. So maybe we'll stop here. It's up to you, Marco, but
No, no, it is. You are posing questions and bringing, items of discussions that are so key and center and front and center into the energy transformation that Japan is really going through. Energy storage is front and center in any aspect of the emerging energy trend and the super cycle that maybe we can talk a little bit about
Yeah.
in a few moments. And the reason is because as a technology, energy storage, battery energy storage, it has been evolving greatly in the last 5, 7, 10 years, and it continues to evolve.
Yeah.
And also one comment, Maya, for what you mentioned about the geothermal, but also by and large, all renewable energy. Energy storage is not the only challenge, is the fact that these form of energy had to be redeployed in a very high quality form
mhm.
because of the loads, because of the utilization, because the end user, the end consumer requirements. Just having energy that is not stabilized, filtered, it's not going to work for a country like Japan and any other country. So there's an issue. There's a high demand for innovation when it comes to energy storage, as well as quality of power, quality of energy,
Right.
and the way that the energy is being monitored and distributed. So very much, very good point.
Yeah, I wonder also because there was a hiatus, let's say, of developing the nuclear power generation here in Japan after the Great East Japan earthquake. So at that time, the government invested heavily, even more heavily, let's say, in the development of renewable, the whole, let's say, renewable energy sector, including battery technology and
Mhm.
everything. But
Yes.
I also wonder, are there industries that cannot rely on renewables because of all the things you mentioned earlier, that it is unstable yet, and it's very difficult to actually stabilize it for the needs of certain sectors of the
I,
industry? And,
I yes, yes, there are. There are, and this is something that is really impacting Japan and many other countries. There is no doubt that renewable energy, solar, wind, are here to stay. The
Mhm.
uh, the speed, the velocity of deployment, and the impact on the ecosystem, the environment, um, is really posing relative challenges, because the world is changing. The energy consumption is growing exponentially. Renewable energy is there to stay, but the velocity of deployment and the ability to really meet the demand makes it very critical, but not the only source of energy that a country like Japan is investing into. That's you bring up yet another very good point. You touched on nuclear. If we look at uh, what happened in Fukushima, years ago, uh, Japan continues to view nuclear as a way of self-sustaining itself. Out of the 33 power plant that are there deployed in the island, I want to say probably 14 have been cleared by the government for some form of operational levels. So there's a way to go because there's a public sentiment that is still very you know delicate and sensitive to what
Yeah.
happened,
Yeah.
and that's something that the government and the public authority, the legislators, are really having to take into consideration. But very much so, renewable energy growth, energy efficiency, which goes to back to your question, Maya, in terms of stability and quality of power generated, the ability to store energy. So innovation technology is front and center in Japan right now. Nuclear power that is there, it's been there, and it's poised to uh, reposition itself as a major driver. So I would say, by and large, there's this unique mix of energy solutions. The combination of fossil fuel, nuclear power, and renewable sources that are really making Japan, in my view, a very uniquely positioned country when it comes to mid long-term strategy of the energy plan. And
Right.
by the way, when we talk about strategy, energy plan strategy, Japan's government has been very clear, honing in on specific drivers to make the country carbon neutral by 2050. If you only think of the net zero target and the mandates that companies and businesses have now to align, if you think about what we just talked about, the deployment of renewable energy and the expansion, and Japan looking at increasing the share of renewable energy in its power generation, we're looking at probably a 23% uh, in the power generation mix right now being renewable, and seeing that mix going to probably 50% by 2040. That
Mhm.
gives you an idea how much Japan is investing into renewable. Nuclear power, we talked about. It's probably, uh, I want to say, a vision of maybe aiming back to a 20%
Yeah.
of the share of the energy mix going back to nuclear, which is
Right.
a
Yeah.
lofty goal for Japan.
That's yeah.
So
Yeah. Could I? So I think that you made one comment that is an interesting cultural observation, that even though a lot of Japanese, they understand, whether we like it or not, we need nuclear at least as a tie over until we can develop some of these other safer resources. But now it is getting safer. And what is it? The thorium nuclear reactor. I think the Chinese already got it up and running.
Yeah.
And I
Yes.
did a deep dive a few years ago, and I think Bill Gates had a foundation. They were developing it. I think it was right before, actually, it was probably right before Japan's disaster.
Right.
And it puttered out because the public suddenly, not just Japan, just generally, turned against it, right?
Right.
But it looked like a really promising resource. And I'm going back to the localized versus centralized.
Hmm.
The model there was to make smaller ones. They're safer, they're easier to manage, and they make them local. And so your grid is not dependent on one outage. And that's distributed, and it's more efficient locally delivering that power in the long run, right?
Hmm.
That was the logic that does that, like it. And by the way, it's, what is it, 7 to 10 years to build a nuclear reactor. So that's,
Right. Right.
if you're going to do it, you got to start now.
Yes.
You're
Very,
running out of time, right? So,
very true. Very true. I want to say, if we consider all these trends, um, we talked at the beginning about challenges and opportunities, right? I want to say energy supply security, meaning envisioning Japan and the legislature to really deploy this strategy and to address this challenge of having uh, energy supply security, and bringing in the diversification of energy resources, uh, requires uh, investment, and that's where I see most of the opportunity in terms of innovation, technology, infrastructure modernization, and et cetera. So I would say it's easy to really take a snapshot of Japan's energy status quo and situation, ecosystem right now, but it's also very exciting to see what's next.
yeah,
And
right, right.
I think if you look at what's next, is the world is going to digitalization. The world is, not only Japan, is going through a whole new scale of energy demand, of
Right.
the likes and the percentages in growth that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
talking about data centers. I'm talking
Yeah,
about
right. Exactly.
AI, the AI,
Yeah.
the artificial intelligence, high computing power, the density of computers, and how all our world and facets of our daily life rely on anything that really cloud data is able to sustain. So anything that I share today is the fact that we all understand what Japan has gone through in the journey of modernization, but there's a whole centralized purpose. There's an overarching purpose here to really position uh, Japan to be ready to sustain this major transformation, the green transformation, with these lofty goals of net zero and
Yeah.
bringing down carbon footprint. But mostly front and center is the digitalization. There's no question that
Right.
that is really the ultimate goal, to really be able to sustain
Yeah.
and manage a country that is front and center in terms of advancement, innovation, and digitalization.
Indeed.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
And
Yes. Well,
so,
before we move on, please give me maybe half a minute or a minute to say thank you to our other sponsor. And yes, so we can continue afterwards. And a big thank you to House, or as they are known, also House Inc. You can find them online, or you can connect with them via their email, which is webmaster@house.co.jp. So they work in Yokohama as well. They do custom home design and construction, and they do commercial building construction. If you haven't seen any of their work, I do recommend you follow James Howell and Hannah Roshizawa Howell. They have beautiful posts about the final products of House on LinkedIn. So also connect with them and talk with them. You can once again talk with them either in English or in Japanese, and tell them exactly what you want, because they're there to customize their services and make your dreams come true. Okay, and with this, now we can continue with the.
Sure.
Yes, please. Yes,
I'm trying to raise my hand today and be
yes.
polite.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, so where was I? Oh, so I'm interested also in solar technology because I hung out with people who were like really into preserving nature, and they said those panels are made from fossil fuels. So yeah, on the one hand, we're generating, and they only last 20 years. Then you got to dispose of them. So there was a lot of negativity, even though a lot of them were using them. It wasn't so much a step in the right direction. It was a smaller step in the wrong direction in their mind.
Right.
And I'm wondering, since that is ultimately from a fossil fuel, is there a desire to shift away from solar and or new materials to generate solar? Like, are there technologies they're trying to go in that direction with? So I just was kind of curious about that.
I would say this is another great question, Tim. Yes, there is. I think that in the ecosystem, in the energy ecosystem, renewables, as I said, remain front and center. There's a clear trend of innovation that are making solar panel material technology, uh, you know, better fitting in terms of environmental constraints. But I will say there are challenges with that, and I
Right.
will ping back to what we're going through here in the United States, since you brought it up as far as giving the audience also a purview of what some of these challenges are actually shared across countries.
Okay.
If you look at the demand of power that has been evolving and in the emerging segments in the last 5 years, data centers are really the key driver of increased consumption, and is at a scale that large utilities today are struggling to realign their infrastructure, to reposition their capacity to meet that demand. And the first place that they looked at was renewable energy, was solar, wind. The problem with that is that the velocity and the acceleration, the readiness of that technology is lagging behind. So you see scenarios where, unfortunately, energy operators here in North America, in Europe, and to a certain extent in also in Asia, are having to resort to go back and recommission fossil fuel technology to meet the uh, fast growing demand of power driven by data centers and AI.
Yeah.
So my answer to you, my comment to you is that technology and velocity of deployment will play a factor into how much
Yeah.
and how fast solar can help meet increased demand of energy.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. That's a good answer. Thank you.
So, and I want to mention, I briefly mentioned that word, and sometimes people are scratching their head and try to figure out what is the energy super cycle.
Right.
Um,
Mm.
and that's something that I'm very passionate about, because it's really all the above. We talked about renewable energy. We talked about technology innovation. We talked about uh, infrastructure investments. It's all the above. But when you take all these drivers and you make them converge into a time frame like the one that we've been going through in the last 5 years,
Right.
that is a unique, unprecedented super cycle. Meaning, is the occurrence, is the structural change that we see in the energy market in Japan, the increase in demand of electrification, the increase in demand of digitalization, particularly because of the artificial intelligence and the data center.
Yeah. Right.
These are unique events, unprecedented events that are converging in time, in a scale and with a dynamic trend that has never been seen before.
Right.
And I want to spend a few moments just to try to give you examples. When we think about data centers, um, you see here in the United States, a state like Virginia becoming a major hub for the high level concentration of data centers simply because of tax and legislation. But you see more and more company of the likes of what people refer to as hyperscalers. So Google, Meta, AWS, Microsoft, really trending their R&D and trending their investment in infrastructure to become almost like producers of energy. These large
Mm.
companies are investing billions of dollars to build their own power substations to
Their own
become
localized.
they're becoming self-performing in the way
That's
that they
yeah,
procure, but also they generate quality power, stable power, and they're
yeah,
relying less and less on the utilities, on the public power utilities. In
yeah,
Japan, there's an evolution step or change where the country is heading in that direction.
Mhm.
Clearly, in the smaller percentage in terms of evolution, but there's no question in my mind that Japan is poised for an exponential growth of um, independent power production generation to meet the demand of these technologies, large computers.
right.
Um, and we will see more and more of that. We see NTT data, we see Google, we see companies that are really scaling tremendously because the demand of data and cloud is there. And also I want to add one very critical element that is causing this scaling is not so much the power, but it's the fact that that energy is mission critical. Imagine for a second that
Yeah,
you have a loss of power, a brownout or a blackout on a data center that is powering a
yeah,
health network of hospitals.
Yeah.
Imagine a blackout or brownout of a data center that is producing data for financial institutions. The impact of of basically downtime that this would have
yeah,
on the
yeah.
community is tremendous, let alone loss of lives.
So
Um,
reliability is really important.
Absolutely, Tim.
Mhm.
Right,
Absolutely. So
right. Yeah,
if I look at the way that I've seen um, large corporations that are in the energy business in Japan, and also governments looking more and more into the three key layers of the energy, it's not
Mhm.
only the technology, but is the reliability, resilience, and sustainability.
Sustainable. Yeah.
Reliability because you need to have power where it's needed in the quality that is needed. Resilience is because you have to have power at a quality level that can be restored in a timely fashion if it goes down to avoid loss of lives. And sustainable because Japan's commitment to really reduce carbon footprint. So there's an element of mission criticality that you see more and more becoming key in Japan and all the other countries when it comes to digitalization and the supply of energy that is entailed. So
Right.
that's really what I wanted to share in terms of people wondering what is this energy super cycle and why is it important. It's important because of the scope of the changes and the drivers of evolution and technology
and the
that we're
dire
seeing today
need.
and
Yeah,
the need, but also because of the timing. Is the
right,
timing
right.
convergence that
Accelerated.
is bringing all these drivers at a criticality level that is, uh, you know, basically at the same time.
You're trying
So
not to, yeah, you're just trying to stay afloat and move that technology development as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And you know,
exactly.
I if any I just think if anyone can do this, it's the Japanese. If
Yes.
anyone can
Yeah.
figure it out, because they're used to manufacturing systems that, you turn the line on like it's a faucet of water, and they're so reliable because they fix everything along the way until it gets to that point,
Right.
right? Near
Exactly.
perfection, right?
Right.
And
Right.
I mentioned earlier resource starved, and I wanted to make one like little, I think it's subtle but very important. The Japanese considered that they only had one resource in abundance, and it was their people.
Mhm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so they got really good. I mean, just out of necessity, you have to value your people. If you're a rice culture, you got to value that.
Yeah,
And you got to value their power of creativity, what those human resources can do, the thinking power. Like very
absolutely,
practical, right? And
absolutely.
they develop those their people resourcefully as best they can
Yeah,
to create all these other things. I mean, it's all built on that foundation, the
yeah.
idea that the people are the resource. And
Hmm.
when I say they're resourceful, I mean they're resourceful thinkers. They're going to think, everybody thinks they're not creative. They're like really creative. And they're going to
They
try to figure out what's available that, okay, we don't have oil here.
right,
What can we, what
Mm,
else can we do? And
right.
so I mean, I think when I say resourceful, I don't mean just the stuff that the nature gives you.
Right.
It's
right.
whether you focus on your people as a genuine resource,
Yes,
and that's, to
people.
me, that's baked in their culture.
I would
Mm,
say I'm very happy and that you brought that up, Tim, because when I lived in Japan and I worked for the industry, I have seen the attention, the focus on people, both as a consumer, but also as talent, to really come as critical as I ever seen it before.
Yeah,
Um, Japan is really at a crucial point of having to reharness nuclear, having to uh, continue to shift to renewable energy, and having to bring carbon footprint and CO2 fossil fuel down. So
right.
there's no path to success for Japan to harness these three trends without talent, without the investment in people. And if
yeah,
you ask me, that is where I have seen most changes in the country for the time that I've been involved, both from the supply side, meaning the technology and the
yeah.
way that companies are investing in skilled talents, in leaders, as
Mhm.
well as also, I want to say, from the consumer's point of view. I have seen Japanese consumers becoming more and more sensitive, more educated on what they uh, need to really optimize their standard of life, to improve their standard of life. We think about, for example, the way that the utilities are really now allowing people, consumers, to really manage their own choices in terms of power and energy generation, self reliance. It wasn't there 10 years ago. It wasn't there as much 20 years ago, even less. So there's more educated consumers in Japan, and there's vastly more committed and focused suppliers in terms of technology today.
Huh.
Um, that's what I see.
Yeah, I love that because it is also, as Tim, we like to bring in the cultural aspect to this. And once again, I think that this is very typical of the Japanese as a nation because they, when there is a challenge, they are slow to provide a solution to the challenge, and they are slow because they are looking at all the
What's
available options.
what's the question? They're
What's the
trying to figure out
question
the
first?
question. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
what's the question? And then they're looking for the available options there. And of course, they do the, well, can I say the buy-in, of different stakeholders and everything. So at the end of the day, once again, it comes down to people
Very
and what people do in certain situations, right? That's what we mean when we talk about culture here. And as Tim said, I believe that if somebody can do it, this will be the Japanese, right?
I agree. I completely agree. I would say I think about my time in Japan working with large utilities, working with their contractor companies, and I've seen a generational change in the way that the leadership is now running those companies. They had to really, they woke up about maybe 7, 10 years ago plus to a stark reality where they started seeing uh, the deployment of new technology. Think about, as you said, solar, wind. Think about the infrastructure change that Japan is now embarking into to sustain and support EV charging stations, the electrical vehicle, the EV infrastructure. Think about the energy storage, and think about last and not least the impending and scaling demand of power because of AI and data centers.
Yeah.
The utilities woke up to a new reality in such a short amount of time that they had to really step back and rethink their business model,
Yeah.
to rethink the way that they invest capital in new technology.
Yeah.
So this is really the reality today. And I would say my initial comment, challenges and opportunities. There is no question in my mind that Japan is poised for um, a fast growth and a bright future because of what the technology companies are now doing to really bring innovation to the market.
Yes.
And at the same time, I would say because a more and more apparent partnership between the technology companies, the innovation groups, and the public sector, the government, in pooling capital, in proving technology in real life with the infrastructure. So I see TEPCO, Chubu Power, largest utilities in the island, embarking more and more and devoting more and more capital into innovation projects, into migration to emerging technology. So this is really very promising to me. It's a very good sign.
And
Do
very
you see? Oh, I'm sorry.
no, so go ahead, Tim, because we have a couple of questions also
Okay.
from the audience, but please go ahead first.
Sure. Just a question. Do you see any trend toward privatization of power rather than being nationalized? And, you gave the example of data centers want to having their own power source. So I guess that's privatized in that sense. But privatized meaning they could compete with the big boys, or no, they're not going to allow that. I'm just asking.
So there's clearly already a thriving trend in Japan of independent power providers
Okay.
that are basically positioning themselves into a liberalized market. They invest private capital into aggregating power, storing power, deploying power to residential industrial communities.
Okay. I
And
didn't
that
know that.
is that,
Yeah.
if you ask me, that is one of the major challenges and driver for change for the large utilities, because
Gotcha.
they are now having to face this new reality where,
Competition.
yes, absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yes,
Good.
yeah. I have a friend who actually invested into a windmill, building a windmill, yes, maybe a decade ago, and things are going well, for him and his co-investors. So I believe that there are many, many like him, and probably
Absolutely.
that number will increase.
Absolutely.
And yes, so we have a comment from Kevin Newman here, and he says, "Thank you for bringing Marco on the program. Very timely topic for Japan going forward. Thank you very much for watching, Kevin." And here is the question that Kevin has. How will data centers evolve outside Tokyo, like Fukuoka, Kansai, etc.? Lots of Japanese corporates are moving to cloud, albeit very slowly, but latency or other issues of data centers are far away.
Mhm.
So
It's
Marco continues, most remain hybrid for the reliability. How will Japan use green solar infrastructure, which is abundant in rural areas, to power data centers? Is the future MW scale batteries?
mhm.
Marco,
The,
you can read that, right? Because I
You
wouldn't
can,
remember everything she just said if I couldn't read it
I,
along.
I I can't I cannot read, but I can certainly relate. It's a great question. and it's multifaceted. I would say this, to the point of the trend for data center deployment and scaling footprint in Japan, there's only one way, and that way is forward, is really strong growth. And it's strong growth at two different levels. The larger companies referred to normally as hyperscalers. So the Meta, the Google, the entity data, the Microsoft will continue to establish themselves as leader and huge consumer of powers to the point that they will become more and more self-relying and self-performing. That's one. The second tier of data center that is likely to scale as fast in Japan is called co-locators. Those are smaller companies that are concentrating into a given hub, a building that is basically a multi-tenant that will host several companies. Demand of energy there is just as critical as a hyperscaler, to a lesser scale, obviously, but nevertheless, very, very front and center in the way that Japan is going to evolve. And there's a third trend that maybe the person that posed the question probably already knows, is the fact that it is clear right now here in North America, and it won't be too long until that trend will be seen in Japan as well, where the smaller tier actor called co-locators will concentrate and cluster themselves more and more to become themselves hyperscalers.
Right. And to be able, yes, to
Right,
benefit from, yes, all the
right.
economies of,
Now, related to the question on how much reliability the renewable energy is posing, is positioning itself to really become a direct feed into data center demand power demand, that's a very challenging question. Um, Renewable energy has challenges in storage, has challenges in power quality, stability. So storage, battery energy storage technology will be key in guaranteeing stability to loads, to consumption of energy that is very, very mission critical. So as of right now, I would say it's a journey, but I can see renewable energy becoming technologically reliable to a level that it will be more and more utilized for data center. But we're talking about power density that will continue to see utility power, large sources, continue to lead that demand,
Mm.
because data
Well,
center consume a lot of power.
yeah. And I think you mentioned that big, well, let's say digital services producers like AWS and also Google, Microsoft, and so on. They have, there is a trend there of them becoming self-sufficient in terms of energy production. But at the same time, I think that we need to remember that even though they will be self-sufficient, they will still need a second and maybe a third supplier in case something happens, right? So that
Backup.
they can back up
Yeah,
their
backup systems.
energy supply. Yes, and that's
Absolutely.
the,
Yes.
so. Do you see that to come from local energy suppliers,
I
or do
think
you?
so.
Yeah.
I think it's a great question, Maya. I think that it will be too multifaceted or two pronged.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Data centers are they have no choice. They have to continue to operate in a reliable and highly resilient way. They have so much liability to the community that they are not in a position to negotiate uh, on whether backup and reliability and resiliency is an issue or not.
Right.
There's no option there. Yes, they will need to rely on reliable sources, whether being utilities that are incrementing, that are growing their capacity, or being on independent power providers, and also on new technology. What I see today is that they are not wasting time to become, in most cases, self-performing, self-reliable. uh, on their own infrastructure. They design, they work hand in hand with power utilities to design and build their own transmission substations and distribution network in their hub. So they have the cash, they have the power, they have the clout, if you will, the technology clout to dictate how they're gonna organize their energy infrastructure. So that's what I see today. On the co-locators, the tier two, and I don't want to sound disparaging or diminishing the importance, but on the smaller power players of the data centers called co-locators, there's going to be a longer journey to that level of energy demand. But nevertheless, data centers are going to be a way of life. Any
Right.
aspect of our life today and in the future will rely on the new normal, which is cloud data traffic, reliable data, on time, and extreme high reliability, resilience, and sustainability. So those are the things that we see today that will remain.
Right.
Did you see Kevin's last comment? I think that's worth mentioning.
Okay, so it is a problem with Japanese owned data centers is actually security. They are sieves for cybersecurity. Only Amazon Web Services, Azure, and Google are able to handle security at scale.
Mhm.
Yes.
So,
Interesting. I didn't even
so
think about that, but it makes sense. Yeah.
it's very true. Yes, I agree. Cybersecurity investment into data monitoring, blockchain, all these technologies are really front and center into large conglomerates like the hyperscaler. But one should not underestimate that same level of criticality for the smaller data centers. That's what we see today. It's cybersecurity is a new normal. It's no longer a challenge. It's there, and it's a de facto standard for for the end users, not so much for the data center operator, but most importantly for the person, for the company, the
Mhm.
business that utilizes the data. Think uh, healthcare network, hospitals, think military sites, think financial institution, all the above, and the list goes on and on. So I agree with the viewer comment that it's there. I think that cybersecurity in Japan is accelerating fast, and the investment in cybersecurity, and the trend will only continue, I would say.
Let's hope so. Yeah. Thank you,
Yes.
Kevin. All those comments were great. The questions were great.
Yes, thank you very much for listening, tuning in, listening, and
Yeah.
the comments and questions as well. They make they make the conversation even more nuanced and richer. So
Yeah.
thanks a lot for that.
I could keep going on, but we're the hour's up, and hopefully we
Yes,
can have you back on, Marco. I enjoyed the conversation. I know we interrupted you along the way, but you gave great answers, so I
yes,
learned a lot. So
No, no worries, no worries. It's great to talk to you guys, and there's no interruption. It's just a brainstorming and try to really address any questions that you or our viewers may have.
I
well,
enjoyed it very much, and I learned a lot. So thank you
I
very much.
did too. Thank you. I'm looking forward to your next session with us when your schedule allows, because we know that you're a very busy person. But yes, whenever your schedule
Let us
is
know
up
when
for
you're
it,
ready. Yeah, you're
Absolutely,
welcome on.
we'll
it'll
be
be a
happy to have you
pleasure.
on.
Absolutely, I want to remain connected, and we can discuss maybe additional topics, new topics.
Yes.
It's important to make it fun and also enticing for us all and for the people that
Yeah,
are following us.
Yes,
very
thank you
good.
very much indeed. And to everybody who watched us or will watch us today or later this week, have a good day. Be with us once again next week on Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock, or watch us during the week. And once again, we've got a shout out for our lovely sponsors. That's Kanchu or Kanchu.com and House. Now let's enjoy the music and let's enjoy the speed.